Maybe he just doesn't take showers every day, I suggested. Kent nodded as he looked around, showing he thought it possible. Well, whatever the case, he's not here now. I don't see any sign of Jepson being here either. But then again, who could tell? Where to now, I asked. Kent didn't answer right away, but kept surveying the bedroom as if something would suddenly materialize or Parkinson himself might suddenly appear from underneath the bed. That gave me an idea, and I crouched down on my knees to look under the bed. I half expected to see a dead Gordon Parkinson, or used condoms, or something else equally disgusting. Instead, I saw a cardboard box. Its dimensions were about the size of a shoebox, but it was plain brown, the kind you typically saw for shipping. I reached under and brought it out. Kent watched closely and walked over. Probably used needles or something, he said derisively. Let's find out, I said, and placed it on the mattress. The top was shut by an enclosed flap. I pulled it open and looked inside, instantly confused. Inside were various pieces of jewelry and several wristwatches. None of it looked particularly valuable. The watches, in fact, were off brands you would commonly see sold at a Walmart. But each item had one thing in common. It was all female jewelry. What is this guy? A serial killer? Kent said. I just shook my head, unsure of what it meant. Maybe it belongs to his girlfriend, I said. Kent laughed. That loser hasn't had a girlfriend since the 10th grade. Kent took a ballpoint pen out of his shirt pocket and began rummaging through the contents. One of the items was a silver bracelet that looked more expensive than the rest. Kent hooked it with his pen and raised it up to eye level to get a better look at it. Look at this, he said, pointing at some lettering on a small band attached to the bracelet. It was in Spanish. I took out my phone and opened an English to Spanish translator. The words were Con Jesus here. I typed in the words and tapped enter. The English translation was With Jesus Go I. Below the inscription were the initials MS. I showed the results to Kent, who looked at it, then went back to studying the box. It looks like stuff from at least 3 different females, he said. So either Parkinson is a ladies' man, or he has some interesting side hobbies, I said. I wonder who MS is. Kent shrugged. Could be anyone. It could be stuff he stole. Maybe he's creeping houses around here to support his habit. It would explain the Spanish. It's about 40% Hispanic in this part of Provo. It made sense, so I nodded my agreement. Kent dropped the bracelet back in and picked up the box. I looked at the bracelet again. Something about it was ringing a bell for me. Let me borrow your pen, I said. Kent handed it to me. I picked the bracelet up with the pen and studied it closer. The reference in Mortenson's report about Jepson's sighting of Samantha's kidnapping suddenly flooded into my memory. You read Mortenson's reports that Dustin gave us, right? I asked Kent. Kent looked momentarily perplexed at my question, then nodded and said in a bewildered tone, Yeah. Kent didn't answer me. He just looked at the bracelet I held up. It was silver with blue turquoise stones. He made eye contact with me, and we both began to smile. I think we might have just hit pay dirt, I said. Kent nodded. Another memory hit me. What about that folder of letters you found the last time you were here? Did you ever get a chance to look through them? Kent shook his head no. They're still sitting in the back of my Chevy. He looked around and grimaced. Let's get out of this stink and go to your apartment to look it all over. This place is giving me the creeps. I had to agree with him. We had been in the apartment for almost 10 minutes, and my sense of smell still hadn't acclimated. The place had an oppressive air about it. It was as if all the self-destruction that occurred in the place had seeped into the walls and threatened to invade us the longer we stayed there. We left and were at my apartment in 5 minutes. We sat at my kitchen table, and Kent put the folder containing the letters and notes on top. I placed the box with the jewelry items next to it. Hold on a second, I said. I retrieved 2 pairs of latex gloves from a container I kept as part of a first aid kit. I tossed one pair to Kent as I put on the other. I took out the bracelet we had been looking at earlier and studied it more closely. If this is Samantha's, why is the inscription in Spanish? I don't think it's hers, Kent said. I tore my attention away from the bracelet and looked at Kent. Because of the initials? I asked him. He nodded. Yeah, that and the Spanish. Look at all this stuff. It's all in Spanish. All the notes and letters. A lot of it's in different handwriting, too. Kent held up one of the notes by the edges as he tried to read it. You got some paper and a pen? He asked. I should, I answered. Well, go get it, and I'll type everything I read into Google Translate and then read off the translation to you, Kent said. It'll go faster that way. Let's see if any of it is connected to any of the jewelry. Okay, but Kent, why would Jepson claim he saw that bracelet on Samantha if it's not hers? Well, I don't know for sure, but my guess is he never actually saw her with the bracelet. I think your buddy Mortensen was right, and Jepson was lying about the whole thing. Mortensen ain't my buddy, I said as I stood and went into my bedroom to get the pen and paper. When I got back, I sat down and opened a college-ruled letter-sized spiral notebook. I'm ready when you are, but I got another question before we start. Shoot, Kent said. If he lied about Samantha, then he must not know anything about her disappearance. Why are we looking at this stuff if that's the case? Our job is her, not whatever that junkie was up to. We should just give it to the cops or something. Because one, we actually don't know he wasn't involved with her disappearance. Maybe it's a red herring to confuse the police. The other thing is even simpler. We got nothing else. Let's follow this and see where it leads. It was hard to argue with him. It made sense. So I shut up and we spent the next 2 hours trying to decipher and translate the letters. Most of them contained personal facts that meant nothing to us or our case. Who died, who got a job, and who had a baby. That kind of thing. But as we got near the end of the letters, we began to see two things that provided a common thread. All the letters were either written by or addressed to a female. As best as we could tell, there were at least 6 different women who the letters belonged to. There were also frequent references to a panaderia, meaning bakery in English. In the United States, a panaderia was sometimes simply referred to as a Mexican bakery. The one in the letters was called Panaderia Carlos, and it was located in West Valley. I think that place warrants a little checking into, Kent said while rubbing his eyes. Jepson or Parkinson has some kind of association to the place. In what way, I asked. His connection? Maybe they're selling drugs out of there? Kent said and shrugged. I think we should sit on the place for a bit and see if anything presents itself. What about Parkinson? I asked. Kent leaned back in his chair and furrowed his brow, thinking. He's off somewhere for now, but still around. We got to keep an eye on his place, too. That means it's going to have to be you. He's met me and knows my vehicle, and I'm going to need the van for the bakery. So it's going to be you and your car for Parkinson. Besides, it's just down the road from you anyway. I nodded, knowing he was right. West Valley was one of the higher crime areas of Utah. It was important to keep a low profile. Kent needed the van more than I did. Kent tapped on his phone for a few seconds and then smiled a little. The place is open on Sunday, clear till 7 if you can believe that. I shrugged and said, They must make good stuff. Yeah, but what sort of good stuff? Kent snorted. I'll head to the garage right now and trade vehicles. I think you ought to gear up and head over to Parkinson's. Yeah, okay, I said with a sigh and stood up, stretching. Kent stood as well. He looked down at the clutter of items on the table. You need to place all that in Ziploc bags and keep it somewhere safe, he said. It would be inadmissible as evidence in a courtroom, but it could come in handy as leverage against Parkinson if the need arises. I nodded in consent. Kent walked toward my front door, opened it, and then stood at the entrance looking at my door jamb. He peered down close and frowned. You're right. There's no sign of forced entry. I'll bet they picked it like we did Parkinson's. Yeah, probably, I said. Kent looked at me, his face showing concern. Seth, why are you still living in this dump? Can't afford anything else. I laughed a little. Bull crap, he said. You could find a better place for about the same price, and if not, you could board with me until you had the funds. I've told you that a dozen times. This place is a rat hole full of druggies and welfare bums. The locks on your door are barely a step above what Parkinson has. I'm amazed you haven't been robbed yet. So am I told him. I think it's because everyone around here knows I'm as broke as they are. His expression softened as he looked back at me. I knew where he was about to go, and I didn't want to hear it. I better get moving, man, I said. For all we know, Parkinson is home right now. Kent shook his head, perceiving what I had just done, and then decided it wasn't worth it. Yeah, you're right, he said. Keep in touch. I'll give you a call at 5. Keep your phone on. Yup, I said and shut the door behind him after he walked out. I stood in the tiny living room of the one-bedroom apartment I had called home for the past 10 years. He was right. It was time for me to leave the place. It was full of ghosts. Ghosts of Jennifer and a former life that was long past and dead. She and I had lived here for the 5 years we were married. I didn't need to be Sigmund Freud to know why I wouldn't move. I shook my head, dismissing it, and went into my bedroom to get my gear bag. It wasn't the time for an exorcism. Chapter 15. 1. Sat parked outside of Parkinson's apartment for the rest of the afternoon and saw nothing more exciting than a few stray cats and other tenants from the neighboring units. Neither the cats nor the tenants gave me a second glance, and I was close to dozing off when Kent called at 5. Anything? He asked. Lots of nothing, I said. You? No, unless you want to count the parade of women buying rolls and tortillas. No tattooed ex-con-looking types walking out with baggies full of crystal meth? I joked. Ken ignored my banter. I need to go inside and look around. If there's more than conchas being made in there, I can't tell just sitting out here. Wait up, I said. I can be there in about 40 minutes. It's Buckus down here. I think Parkinson has gone to parts unknown. You and I haven't had good luck running solo lately. I think we should tag team it. Besides, I haven't had a good Oresha in a long time. Oreja, I ain't that kind of partner. No, you're the stupid kind, I said, and ended the connection. The bakery was a small thing, snug in an aging strip mall. Other than a Harbor Freight Tools and a thrift store that sold secondhand clothes, the other units were empty. The local denizens were overwhelmingly Hispanic. Utah, like all Western states, had acquired a significant Hispanic population in the last 30 years. It was, overall, a positive thing for the state. But just as with all immigrant waves, there was a small smattering of bad mixed in the much larger good. The bad was the increase in gang activity that had occurred in recent decades. I didn't doubt that crime would have still been abundant with or without the Hispanic immigrants. But crime always followed the path of least resistance. When a large population of people were not yet assimilated and in a sense disenfranchised, you could expect an increase in things like crime, especially organized crime. Looking back in history, you saw the same with every major ethnic group that had come en masse to the United States. It wasn't a racial problem, unless you wanted to call it a human race problem. It was just what people did until they found a niche. Just like with former immigration waves, like the Irish, the Italians, the Ashkenazi Jews, and the Southeast Asians, the vast majority of the newly arrived Hispanics were law-abiding and only sought a better life for themselves. Also, just like with the former immigration waves, there was a small segment that sought new territory to institute various criminal activities. Ken and I knew we needed to be careful when operating in West Valley. Panaderia Carlos was most likely exactly what it appeared to be, a bakery owned and operated by hardworking Hispanic immigrants chasing the American dream. But it could be more, and we had to make sure. When I arrived, Kent was still in the surveillance van, the tinted windows and drawn curtains making it impossible to see inside. He was parked on the opposite side of the street from the bakery. I texted Kent when I arrived so he could unlock the doors. I walked to the van, opened the sliding door, and got inside. Kent was bundled up in a blanket with the ceramic heater blowing directly on him. He had the van positioned so he could see the panaderia out the left side windows. It was just past dusk, and the street lights were coming on, as well as those in the panaderia. The windows of the store were covered with ads and posters, making it impossible to see inside except through one rectangular window pane on the top portion of the building's front door. The place was still busy, with patrons constantly walking in and out, those leaving carrying bags of pastries and tortillas. I suppose they could be hiding drugs inside the pastries, I joked. Yeah, and using middle-aged moms with kids in tow as mules. We're going to have to go in there. My guess is we won't see anything more nefarious than overlooked stale bread, but let's do it anyway. I'm ready when you are, I said. Ken opened the sliding door and stepped out onto the sidewalk. I followed him, and we crossed the street to the front entrance of the bakery. As we approached, two old women walked out, each holding two plastic bags in each hand. Kent held the door for them as I smiled and said hello. They both smiled back and said gracias as they exited the store. Kent walked in, and I followed close behind. The place had an odor of sugar, butter, and baked flour. It was roughly the size of a 7-Eleven inside, with shelves arranged neatly and full of breads and packaged tortillas. On the north side of the store was a display case of various pastries. My stomach grumbled hungrily, and I remembered I hadn't eaten since that morning. At the west end of the display case was a cash register. A middle-aged Hispanic woman was working the register, and she eyed us as she rang up the purchases of a woman in her 60s with gray hair. Ken and I split up, and each of us began to casually browse the items for sale in the store. I walked down an aisle with bins full of small baked rolls and loaves of bread. Every patron in the store was Hispanic except for me and Kent, and I started to feel like an animal on display in a zoo exhibit, that feeling that comes with being a minority. I switched to an aisle that had bins full of packaged cookies. I spied a small bag of pink-colored ones and picked it up. I walked toward the front of the store with the cookies and found Kent at the display case looking over the pastries. The woman at the register finished with the older woman's transaction and walked over to us. "May I help you?" she asked in heavily accented English. "Yeah, can I get a half dozen of those?" Ken answered while pointing to something that looked like a Danish. "That's called a lima," the woman said good-naturedly. "A lima," Kent repeated, and he nodded. "Yeah, can I get a half dozen limas, please?" "Of course," she said. She smiled as she put on disposable plastic gloves and opened her side of the display case. She counted out 6 pastries and placed them in a paper bag as I continued to scan the store for anything that looked out of the ordinary. I hadn't been in a panaderia more than a couple of times, so I guessed I could easily miss something. But as far as I could tell, it looked like a normal business that catered to customers wanting Mexican baked goods. None of the customers looked out of the ordinary either. "Anything for you, sir?" the woman asked me after she had gotten the limas. "Just this," I said, holding up the bag of pink cookies. I gestured toward Kent with my chin. "He's buying." She glanced at Kent, her eyes glinting with amusement, then raised her eyebrows to confirm if that was true. Kent frowned at me and nodded his head. The woman smiled a little. "Those are polverones," she said. I smiled back. "Polverones," I said as close as I could manage with my Utah accent. She laughed a little to herself and nodded as she rang up both purchases on the register. "How long has this store been here?" Kent asked. She seemed to think it over as she placed both the limas and the polverones in a plastic bag. "About 5 years, I think," she finally answered. "Are you the owner?" Kent asked. "Who, me?" she asked in a tone that showed she thought the question ridiculous. She laughed a little again and shook her head. "No, I wish. Maybe one day. It's a dream of mine. But no, I just work the register and help out a little in the back with the baking." "Oh, you got a bakery back there?" Ken asked. She nodded. "573, please." Kent dug out his wallet and handed her a debit card. The mood switched to awkward as the three of us waited for the transaction to go through. A Hispanic man and a young girl of about 9 lined up behind us, both of them trying hard not to look at us but giving that zoo exhibit vibe nevertheless. I smiled at both of them, and the girl smiled back as the man continued to avoid my gaze. "Thank you," the lady at the register said as she handed Kent both his card and a receipt. She turned her attention to the man and the young girl, an obvious signal for us to move on. It didn't offend me. We were 2 white guys in a store that probably saw a dozen white people, most of them women, in a month's time. I didn't think it was anything motivated by animosity. We left the store and walked back to the van. We both got in, and Kent motioned to the passenger seat. "Get buckled in," he said as he sat in the driver's seat and hurriedly took down the dashboard blinders that blocked the windshield. He then started the van and began pulling away. "What are you doing?" I asked as the force of the van pulling forward caused me to plop into the seat. He drove south and turned on the headlights as he neared a stoplight. I tossed the bag of bakery items in the back and looked at my parked Expedition as it faded in the distance. "Where are we going?" I asked, confused now. "We couldn't stay there," he said. He offered nothing else. I let out an exasperated sigh to show my displeasure at being left in the dark, while Ken indulged in another one of his impromptu adventures. He ignored me and kept driving. I continued to stare at him, determined to get some kind of real response. Finally, Kent glanced over. "Got a crimp in your neck or something?" he said with an annoyed voice. I kept staring and furrowed my brow. "What is going on?" I asked. He turned his attention back to the road and didn't answer. He breathed in deeply and then glanced out the driver's window. I looked out the driver's window too, half expecting to see little Richard on a motorcycle. Kent looked back over at me and smirked. "You didn't notice, did you?" he asked. His smirk turned into a grin. It was a smug grin, one that a person gives you when they have a full house and you're only holding a pair of deuces. "Notice what?" I asked. "The poster in the back of the store," he said. "Poster?" I asked stupidly, and immediately regretted it because I had just shown my complete ignorance. His smile turned into a chuckle. "I love it when I can show how much better of a gumshoe I am than you." "Gumshoe?" I asked derisively. "What is this, the 1930s?" He continued to laugh, but suddenly grew serious when he had to slam on the brakes to avoid hitting a car stopped in traffic ahead of us. I grew serious too and cursed out loud when I saw how close we had come to colliding with a late-model Mercedes. Kent looked back at me and the grin returned. "It was a mariachi band," he said. I wondered if one of us was having a stroke considering what little sense that made to me. "Mariachi band?" "Los Coyotes Salvajes," Kent said. I looked back, saying nothing, his words making less sense the more he spoke. "I had a girlfriend from Mexico last year. Remember her?" he asked when seeing my puzzlement. I searched my memory and an image of an attractive Latina who liked short shorts and tank tops popped up. "Yeah, Veronica, I think, right?" I asked. "Yeah, Veronica," he said, smiling and looking forward again as the light changed to green. The van started rolling, and Kent scratched the top of his head as he talked and reminisced. "She was from a town near the border. I can't remember the name of it, but it doesn't matter." "What does matter?" He stopped speaking and grunted a little as he shifted his sore shoulder to a more comfortable position. "What does matter," he repeated, "is that town she lived in was right smack dab in the heart of Sinaloa cartel territory." I sat there saying nothing. I knew Kent was explaining something big to me, but I wasn't getting it. It was a frustrating feeling, because it usually preceded me having one of those "you're dumber than dry dog do" moments I got when the truth finally dawned on me. "Well," Kent continued, "she used to listen to mariachi music nonstop. It was one of the reasons we broke up." "Yeah, and the fact that she maxed out your credit card to buy clothes for her other boyfriend?" "Yeah, okay," he said, cutting me off. "Well, anyway, she listened to mariachi music all the time, like I said, and there was one band she listened to every day until I was ready to take a screwdriver and gouge the eardrums out of my head. It was Los Coyotes Salvajes. I recognized the poster because it was the same as the picture on one of their album covers. I racked my brain trying to remember the layout of the store. I hadn't noticed the poster, but if Kent said it was there, it was there. "Los Coyotes Salvajes," I said out loud. "That means the wild coyotes," we finished saying together. "Yeah, and that's their name for a reason," Kent explained. "Veronica told me all about it once. They sing a lot about smuggling people across the border. Both directions, in fact." "Okay," I said. "So where are you going? There's a cartel connection with that panaderia just because of a poster on a wall? What's the big deal about the wild coyotes?" "Those guys aren't well known outside of that province," Ken answered. "There's a good chance that even someone from Baja or Mexico City wouldn't know about them." It was starting to dawn on me. "So that means," I said thoughtfully. "Uh-huh," Kent said encouragingly, knowing I was about to get it. "That means—" "Whoa!" I yelled. Kent's grin got wider. "That means whoever owns Panaderia Carlos, or at least someone who works there, has got to be from Sinaloa cartel territory." Kent made a dinging sound as he tapped my forehead with his index finger. Kent settled into his seat with a look of satisfaction on his face. He deserved to be smug. He had seen all of it while I had noticed nothing. We rode in silence for the next few minutes until Kent pulled into a Walmart parking lot and parked. He shut the engine off and we sat, both of us mulling over what we had just learned. "Here's my crazy idea," Kent finally said, breaking the silence. "That store is a front. Maybe a money laundering operation. Who knows, for some cartel-connected operators. The letters we found were all women writing home about getting a job there. Then nothing after that. I'll bet you that every one of them is missing right now. I'll bet those are all confiscated letters." "Why would Jepson and Parkinson have them?" I asked. Kent shrugged. "I don't have a clue. But those letters, the jewelry, it's enough of a string of evidence to make me think that Panaderia is the place to concentrate on." I rubbed my chin with my left hand, thinking over his theory. It was out there. Cartel connections seemed to stretch, but I had to admit everything seemed to point that way. But Kent, all those letters were written by young Hispanic women newly arrived in the country. How would Samantha work into all this? We haven't seen anything to tie her to it other than Jepson's eyewitness account about the bracelet. And that bracelet looks like it belongs to a Hispanic woman. Kent looked morose after I finished, and we both went back to sitting quiet in the van. It was now approaching 8 at night, and the cold early December air was beginning to penetrate the confines of the vehicle, making me shiver. A thought suddenly struck me, causing me to be both excited and embarrassed at the same time. I was loath to verbalize it because I knew how it would look. Then I recalled Brooke's comical abhorrence from the previous day and realized I had the same issues she did. This is going to sound a little redneck, I said. Kent looked at me with a bewildered expression. What? He said. Officer Menendez, I stated simply. You mean the guy you talked to the other day? Kent asked. Yeah, I answered. Kent snickered. Yeah, that kind of screams bigot. You're saying he's cartel connected because he's Hispanic? Kent said this with humor in his voice, letting me know he was only joking. But I stayed serious. No, not simply because he's Hispanic, because he had contact with Samantha a few months before her disappearance and his weird reaction when I talked to him about it. Mortensen had a weird reaction too. Why isn't he cartel connected? Kent asked with a look of mirth. I held up my hands. Okay, because Menendez is from Mexico as well. I know I look like I need to put a sheet over my head and burn a cross right now, but it fits, Kent. I just can't think of any other way Samantha could be caught up in something like that, except through him. Kent snickered some more. Yeah, assuming Menendez is dirty with cartel connections. I spread my hands. If you got something else, let me hear it. I don't, he said as he shook his head no. Relax, man. It's actually a decent theory. Just don't let the PC police hear you say it. I want to look into the guy, I said. Okay, Kent said, nodding. That's your baby. In the meantime, I'm going to keep eyes on the Panaderia. Not seeing anything during those few hours means nothing. If those guys are cartel, they're pros. That means it's going to take some patience. But I'll bet they'll slip up on something. The van might be a problem for me. I'll bet we were watched the entire time we were in the store, and probably after we left. That's why I drove away. Sitting there would have put a neon sign on us. I can't take the Suburban either, not with little Richard and Lewis prowling around. I nodded, agreeing with him. I'll leave my expedition parked where it is. You should have a pretty good angle to do surveillance. You can park your Suburban down the road and walk up. I need the van tomorrow anyway. It wasn't the best of plans, but Kent nodded in agreement. I'll just drive to my place then, and you can take the van, he said. Hopefully your vehicle is still there tomorrow. I shrugged dismissively. It's barely worth the tires it's sitting on. Kent laughed as he started the van and drove us to his house. Chapter 16. I didn't think trying to talk to Menendez again would garner anything new, so I decided I would follow him around for the day and see what happened. I had to be extra careful because I wasn't truly a pro when it came to tailing techniques, and Menendez was a cop, making him more likely to notice if someone was following him. I parked out in front of the satellite station at 8:30 that morning. As I sat, I looked over the information I had gathered about Menendez doing internet searches. He was originally from Mexico, having immigrated to the United States in 1997 when he was 16. His parents decided to live in Southern California, and he graduated from Cajon High School in 1999. Menendez then dropped off the radar for the next 7 years. The next reference I found for him was an article in the San Bernardino Sun. Menendez had received the Silver Star for neutralizing a sniper who had pinned his unit down in Iraq in 2006. The article included a brief biography about Menendez, including that he had received naturalization due to his military service. He served 2 tours in Iraq and left the military with honor in 2009. He joined the Salt Lake City Police Department in 2010. In 2012, he received a commemoration for stopping an active shooter situation. He had an impressive career as both a police officer and as a soldier. It made the idea that he was dirty and potentially involved with Samantha's disappearance seem ridiculous. But the stalwart citizen with the double and dirty life was something that was all too common. Everyone had once thought Ted Bundy was a great guy too. It was about 10 when I spotted Menendez getting into one of the four parked Salt Lake City police squad cars that lined the curb in front of the station. He drove off, heading south, and I followed him, trying to be careful to leave at least 3 cars between us. It wasn't a very exciting day. He pulled over a red Mustang and a tan Nissan Altima while monitoring a speed trap on State Street in 13 South. He responded to what looked like a shoplifting incident at a Target, then went to lunch around 1:30 p.m. at a Carl's Jr. I watched as he ate in a booth next to a window by the east entrance of the restaurant. After lunch, he went back to the satellite station and disappeared inside for the next 4 hours until his shift was over. I was tempted to follow him home but decided against it, thinking I had pushed my luck. I called Kent to see how his day had gone. "Just lots of women buying conchas again," he said, sounding bored. I did talk to Dustin and gave him another update. He's starting to lose interest, I think. He didn't sound like his normal self. "You mean he wasn't demeaning and a decibel below yelling?" I asked. "Oh, he was plenty demeaning. He thinks we should still be on Broadhead. I think if we don't find something solid in the next few days, he's going to toss us. Whatever. Just because there's nothing today doesn't mean there won't be tomorrow. We stay the course." The next day was much the same as the day before, even down to Menendez's lunch spot. Menendez obviously had a thing for Carl's Jr. I followed him until 3 when he drove back to the satellite station. I waited out front, this time determined to follow him home. I was still sitting there at 4:30 when Kent called. "I'm going to dream about conchas and chulos tonight, I think," he said in a deadpan tone. "It's still more exciting than my day has been," I said. "Serious? I always thought being a police officer would be an exciting job," Kent said. "I'm going to try following him after his shift. Who knows? Maybe he sells meth out of the trunk of his police car in the evening hours." Kent snickered a little. "Well, if you're up to staying on his tail, I'll keep up my end here," he said. "At least until I develop hypothermia." "No one stripped my hunk of junk down to the frame yet?" I asked, looking out the side window at the sky. It was cold enough to snow. The temperature had been 31 the last time I checked, and the sky threatened to do so. I hoped it would wait until I was ready to call it a night. "No, but I'm about to drive it to the boneyard," Kent said. "When's the last time you bothered to clean this thing?" I hung up without answering. Menendez came out 2 hours later. He got into the same squad car he had been driving earlier and headed east. I waited until a white Toyota and a brown Dodge pickup passed before pulling out behind him. I entertained a fantasy that he would drive straight to the Panaderia, but that was quickly extinguished when he got on the Utuai 15 southbound entrance ramp. I got on behind him and followed him to 90th South, at which point he exited and drove west. I was certain he was headed home, but I followed him anyway for the lack of anything else to do. He drove to a 3-bedroom home that was the definition of middle America, complete with a white picket fence and a small dachshund dog that came running up to greet him when he exited the squad car. I drove past the house while maintaining an unsuspicious 25 miles per hour. As I passed, I caught sight of him picking the dog up and greeting a small dark-haired boy who was a miniaturized copy of him. I was a little dispirited at the familiar feeling of another dead end. Maybe the Panaderia was just what it appeared to be, and the poster was just a coincidence. I drove home and went straight to sleep, hoping the next day would garner something other than boredom and monotony. Kent yawned and scratched his belly with his right hand. It was hard for him to sit for long periods, which made surveillance the least favorite part of his job. He hadn't noticed anything happen at the Panaderia since it closed at 9. A man who looked to be in his 40s with graying temples and a bushy mustache had locked up the store, then ridden a mountain bike north up 27th West until Kent lost sight of him in the gloom of night. Kent was tempted to drive after him but decided against it when he realized it would only spook the guy. What would Kent say? "Hey, are you guys selling meth or kidnapped girls out of the back of your bakery?" Kent had also been tempted to creep the store and look around for hidden stashes or a basement. That was another bad idea. The place surely had an alarm system, and if it was truly a cartel-owned business, it was likely guarded by a thug who wouldn't think twice about killing him. It was getting late, though, and he was either going to at least scope out the back of the store or go home in the next 10 minutes. His phone suddenly flashed, showing he had a text from Chrissy. Want to go to the Urban Lounge tomorrow? The Hitmen are playing. The Hitmen were one of Kent's favorite local bands, and he never missed a show if he could help it. He stared at the text, not sure how to respond. He and Chrissy hadn't seen much of each other in the past week because of the case. He knew she was getting antsy and bored because of it. Kent didn't blame her. Seth had been right when he described her as still being a kid, but that was one of the reasons he liked her so much. She didn't take life too seriously, and as far as Kent was concerned, that was really the only true way to approach it. The minute you viewed it otherwise was the minute you stopped truly living. I totally want to, but I don't know if I can. Let me tell you by noon tomorrow, okay? He replied. He watched the icon on the screen showing she was writing a response, when headlights appeared from the south. From the height of them, they had to belong to a car. Kent scrunched down in the driver's seat as it approached, then dropped even lower when the car, a Chevy Camaro, pulled into the parking lot of the Panaderia. The car drove to the back of the store and out of Kent's field of vision. Kent had a brief inner debate as to what to do. It was just as likely a janitor coming to clean the place as anything else, but he had to know. When in doubt, push forward. Kent slowly opened the driver's door and then inwardly cursed when the dome light came on. He hurriedly fumbled around blindly with his right hand until he found a vertical recessed disc that controlled the interior lights. He tried up first and cursed again when it didn't turn the dome light off. He roughly turned it the other direction and calmed when the light went off. He sat still for the next 30 seconds to make sure no one from the Panaderia had noticed the light. Then he slowly stood, the popping in his knees sounding like M80 firecrackers going off in the quiet. He walked cautiously toward the Panaderia and scanned the side of the store for any sign of movement. He could hear the idling engine of the Camaro as he neared the back corner, and then talking when he reached the edge of the building. It was Spanish. Kent reminded himself again to subscribe to Rosetta Stone. It was getting to the point that not knowing Spanish was becoming a major hindrance to his job. He couldn't understand what was being spoken, but the voices were angry and an obvious argument was in process. Kent decided he had to see what was happening, even if it was only for a split second. He put his face flat against the brick of the building and moved his head slowly until his right eye was clear enough to get a peek. There were two men. Both were Hispanic. One was tall with a goatee, wearing jeans and an oversized green parka. The other was heavyset and, to Kent's amusement, wearing khaki cargo shorts with a white tank top. It was as if he had been teleported straight to Salt Lake from sunny LA, where the temperatures were probably in the 50s. The tall guy, Kent decided to call him Goatee, was the one doing the talking. A cloudy mist rose up from his mouth as he expelled angry Spanish. The short, heavy-set one, Kent named him Cargo Shorts, was meekly taking the barrage with his head down. Kent figured he must be some kind of subordinate. In an actual fight, Kent surmised, Cargo Shorts looked like he would make short work of Goatee. Goatee was as scrawny as he was tall, his biceps almost as thin as Cargo Shorts' wrists. But Cargo Shorts looked scared as Goatee suddenly slapped Cargo Shorts on the top of the head like a 19th century schoolmaster would to a wayward student. Cargo Shorts placed his hands on his head and began talking rapidly to Goatee. Whatever he said only angered Goatee more, and Goatee hit Cargo Shorts again, this time harder. Kent looked at the Camaro and saw 4 more figures in the car, 1 in the passenger seat and 3 in the back. Kent's heart raced when he saw that one of them had an unmistakable female form. Goatee stopped yelling, and Cargo Shorts looked up to meet Goatee's stare. Cargo Shorts said something else in Spanish and turned back toward the idling Chevy, forcing Kent to quickly duck behind the corner. Kent heard the door of the Chevy open and close. It was obvious Cargo Shorts was going to leave. Kent had to forsake stealth for speed and ran to the expedition. The Chevy's engine roared and the tires squealed as the Camaro, probably the result of Cargo Shorts needing to channel his humiliation, raced out from behind the building. Kent wasn't going to be able to make it back inside the expedition before they saw him, so he ran to the curbside of the vehicle and ducked behind it. He was careful to make sure he hid as much of his body as possible behind the passenger side front wheel. The Camaro sped south on 27th West, the tires continuing to squeal as the car picked up speed, leaving the smell of burned rubber in the air. Kent waited until the taillights were two distant red dots before hustling into the driver's seat of the Expedition. He fished in his pockets, pulling all the contents of both pockets out in frustration as he saw the taillights of the Camaro disappear in the distance. He found the key to the Expedition and turned it on. He didn't wait for it to warm up, but slammed it into drive and stepped on the gas. Kent shook his head in disgust as the out-of-tune vehicle spurted and jerked in protest. Seth never takes care of his stuff, Kent thought. Kent thought it was amazing the old truck even still ran. He briefly considered doubling back and trading for his Suburban, but it was parked an entire city block to the north, and the delay would make finding the Camaro virtually impossible. Kent would have to stick with the Expedition. He continued stepping on the gas while mentally willing the Ford to warm up and start running right. He scanned the road ahead of him, hoping the taillights would reappear, but he only saw an empty street. He came to 17th South and looked both east and south with the same hope of taillights. What he saw was as bad as nothing. He saw several sets of lights in both directions. It was a gamble as to which direction to go. Kent made a raspberry sound as he continued south on 27th West, hoping his hunch that they were headed for the 201 freeway was correct. Kent floored the Expedition in an effort to catch up to the light ahead. "Yes," he said triumphantly out loud when he got close enough to see it was the Camaro. The female form was still visible in the back seat. Kent's heart rhythm increased even more when he saw she had blonde hair. He stopped about 5 feet behind the vehicle, his vision fixed on the woman. He was tempted to blow the horn on the Expedition, maybe cause the woman to look back so he could get a look at her face. He was further tempted to pull his Glock and attempt a rescue, but there were 4 men in the car, and most likely they were armed. He wasn't as concerned about the danger to himself as he was to the woman if it turned into a gunfight. His last temptation was to call 911. He picked up his phone and almost dialed when he suddenly remembered Menendez. What if Menendez was dirty? What if he wasn't the only one? It was an extremely paranoid thought, Kent knew, but considering what he and Seth had encountered the few days prior, it wasn't something he could simply dismiss. The light turned green, and the Camaro turned toward the on-ramp for State Route 201. Kent, thinking of nothing else to do, followed them onto the freeway. Chapter 17. My phone woke me up. I groaned. My jaw still hurt, and my ribs still ached. My entire head seemed to be one giant bruise when I rubbed my face. Getting kicked in the noggin by an enraged 23-year-old female can make you feel that way. I rolled onto my side and beheld the glaring screen of my iPhone as it rang mercilessly in the otherwise black and silent room. I reached over and saw it was Kent. I grew annoyed when I read that it was 3:27 in the morning. I grumbled and tapped the answer icon. "Yeah," I said irritably. "Where are you?" Kent asked, and I had to bite my tongue not to yell at the guy. Where was I? What kind of stupid question was that? In my bed. Where else would I be at 3:30 in the morning? "I hoped you'd be on Menendez," Kent said. "You know, like, I've been on the Panaderia since yesterday morning." "And why would I do that, Kent? I already told you what I saw yesterday. He's just a beat cop living a boring life." Kent cleared his throat, a sign he was on the verge of a temper tantrum. He didn't do it often, especially not with me, but I had experienced it a couple of times. It was scary to behold, and it got my attention. I was confused as to why he would choose the wee hours of the morning to suddenly have an employer-to-employee PW. But he obviously was upset about something, so I shut up. "Seth, I sat on that Panaderia for almost 18 hours. I did it in this piece of junk you call a vehicle, cold, hungry, and every bit as beat up and tired as you are. I'm now somewhere in the desert west of Salt Lake and staring at a trailer house that could very well have Samantha Palmerson in it. I called you because I can't call the cops. We need to know if Menendez is mixed up in something dirty. We don't know because you're not doing your job." I shook my head a little, not sure if I was getting it all right. Somehow Kent had gotten from watching a string of mostly middle-aged Hispanic women buying bread and cookies at a West Valley Mexican bakery to having eyes on a trailer containing our target in the western desert. I sat thinking, trying to make sense of it. "I don't get it. Why are you out there? And how do you know Samantha is there?" It was a stupid question, but I still had cobwebs in my head. Kent quickly explained everything that had happened in the past few hours, and by the time he was done, I felt like the lazy sack of nothing he accused me of being. Look, I'm sorry, Kent. I followed him after he got off work yesterday, and all he did was head home. I haven't seen any indication he's mixed up in anything. I stood up and turned on the light. How would you know? Maybe he thinks it's a bad idea to meet with cartel members in broad daylight while he's wearing his police uniform? But we don't know because you're 50 miles away and asleep in your bed. His sarcasm was hard to take, but I knew he was right, so I sucked it up. Okay, send me your location and I'll head out there, I said. I don't need you out here, Seth, Kent said icily. I've got eyes on the situation out here. I need you to do your job and shag your butt back to Menendez's place and keep eyes on him. You already know the job is like this. I'm seriously surprised and disappointed, man. I could have already had the cops out here. We could have Samantha with us right now. I knew Kent was right to make sure Menendez wasn't dirty. If he was, calling the cops could get Samantha killed before anyone could get to her. Okay, I said. I'll head to his place right now. But Kent? What? He still sounded angry. I was worried about his response to what I was going to say, but I thought it needed to be said regardless of how mad it made him. What if it's just the same stuff? I mean, all I've seen for the past 2 days is Menendez doing his job. Let's worry about that after you get up there and get eyes on him. Just head up and keep me updated. He ended the conversation without saying anything more. I sucked that up too. I was glad in a way. Things had come full circle, and Kent was in charge. Yeah, we were business partners, but when it came down to it, he had the experience and the operating license. I didn't even bother with a shower. I put my clothes on from the day before, grabbed my gear bag, and headed out the door. I arrived at Menendez's house just before 5 in the morning. I parked the standard 500 yards away from the house. The temperature was hovering around 28 degrees, so I wasted no time setting up the ceramic heater and unrolling the winter sleeping bags to throw over myself as I watched. I felt extra guilty when I thought about Kent's situation and how little surveillance gear I had in my expedition. I unlocked my iPhone and texted Kent. I'm in front of Menendez's house. His squad car is in the same spot as yesterday, so he hasn't left unless it was in another vehicle. How are you faring out there? I didn't get a reply for 10 minutes and was beginning to think he was still fuming and ignoring me when my phone dinged to inform me I had received a text. It's cold, but I'm managing. Still no movement since I got here. Today is the day to push Menendez. By push, Kent meant confront him. I thought about that and how hard it would be. He was a cop, so I needed to be careful. At the same time, I could use that against him. Legal troubles for a member of law enforcement had a double edge. Often the public showed them little sympathy if it could be proven they were dirty and presenting a danger to society. It might possibly stir up a good level of fear for him if he thought I had information that could prove his guilt in illegal activity. The real trick right now was to find the time and place to confront him. The satellite station wasn't an option. He would deny everything simply because of the other cops being present. Plus, who knew if they were involved as well? I thought doing it randomly while he was working his beat would be the best option. Out on the street seemed risky. If he was truly engrossed in cartel business, if he didn't have any compunction against killing someone, it wouldn't be hard for him to fabricate a scenario that necessitated him using lethal force against me. I needed a place where he could feel comfortable enough to talk to me, and where I could keep a semblance of personal security for myself. The Carl's Jr., where he ate lunch, fit the bill. There would be employees and customers as potential witnesses if he chose to become violent, and in his booth, where he always ate, there would be relative privacy in which he might be willing to talk to me. Menendez walked out his front door at 7:30. He chose the same route to get to the satellite station as the one he had taken home the day before. It was a terrible time to go north on I-15. Rush hour traffic varied from 10 miles an hour to a complete standstill all the way downtown. I stayed the customary 3-car lengths back from him until we reached the I-215 split. When I got on to I-215 and took an alternative route in order to ward off being spotted, there was some risk that I would miss any nefarious stop he might make on his way to work, but my gut told me to do it. I took my time getting to the station so I would arrive after him. I texted Kent when I got there. At the satellite on Menendez, nothing to see this morning so far. How about you? I waited for Kent to text back and got a call from him instead. It was quiet until an hour ago, he said. Vehicles started showing up, and there's got to be a half dozen cars and trucks parked around the trailers. Trailers? There's more than one? There's three, he answered. What kind of trailers? Fifth-wheel camping types, large. All of them at least 35-footers, Ken said. Just by themselves or hooked up, I asked. They all got pickups attached to them. The trailers look to be late model, maybe even new. All the pickups are late model. Somebody has some money. What kind of operation do you think it is? Brothel, Kent said. Gotta be. Several times I've seen women walk out of one trailer and over to another. Every time they were accompanied by a man. Guns? I asked. I've seen several armed guys walking around the area doing what looks like security sweeps. Any sign of Samantha? Kent laughed contemptuously. You don't think I would have mentioned that already if I had? Okay, I said. Easy. Just asking a question. Sorry, I'm tired. Kent drew in a breath and made stretching noises. It's making me cranky. Well, I dropped the ball on Menendez. I admit it. You got to push him, Seth. Push him hard. I want to know if he's mixed up in this before I try to go in there. What you mean before you go in there? I asked. Kent didn't answer. I let the silence build for a few seconds. Kent, don't do it. At the very least, wait for me to back you up. I got silence again. I'm heading out there right now, I said anxiously. You don't even know where I am. Send me a link. Push Menendez, Kent said. Unless I actually see Samantha, I won't do anything until you at least do that. Push him, Seth. He ended the connection. There was a going trend to hang up on me, it seemed. I angrily dropped my phone on the passenger seat and mentally willed Menendez to come out. It was approaching noon. I hoped it wouldn't be a late lunch for him. Luck was on my side and Menendez left the station to do his beat at 11:30. He practically made a beeline to the Carl's Jr. He parked in his normal spot and sat in his normal booth. I waited for a few minutes and then got out of the van to walk to the store. I planned to come at him hard and fast. I decided I would try a trick cops themselves often do to suspects when they try to sweat them. I would claim to have evidence that proved his guilt and see if he broke. Unless he was completely unhinged or had an ironclad self-defense claim, he wouldn't dare use lethal force on me in a crowded restaurant. Having a gun on me could grant him that, so I reluctantly left the weapon in the glove box. I walked in the front door and went straight to his booth. He gave me only a casual glance when he first noticed me, but he quickly became startled and cautious as I sat down opposite him in the booth. Hi, Diego, I said with a smile. He looked back at me, a hamburger halfway up to his mouth, a dab of ketchup on the corner of his mouth. He seemed thoroughly confused. You don't remember me? I asked. He continued to look at me, not answering for a few seconds, and then I could see recognition fill his eyes. What are you doing here? He asked, still uncertain and with a touch of hostility. I can't stop in for a superstar and a Coke. Is this place for cartel members only? I said, still smiling, but with an equal edge of hostility in my own voice. Confusion entered his eyes again, the enmity growing. What? He asked. I looked around the restaurant and scrunched up my nose. Man, you Latino goodfellas need to watch The Godfather a few more times or something. I mean, the best you guys can do is fast food? Selling your soul should have better perks than this. What are you doing? Menendez said, looking even more confused. Is this some kind of racist thing or something? What, you think because I'm Hispanic I'm in a cartel? I shook my head. Not because you're Hispanic, but because you're a scumbag. We know, Diego. I've got hours of footage of you hanging out with your cartel friends. We know about Panaderia Carlos, and we know about the brothels. Tell me where Samantha Palmerson is, and I go away. Don't tell me, and I go to the feds and the media. Menendez put his hamburger down on the table and retrieved a paper napkin. He wiped his mouth and stared at me with unflinching eyes. It wasn't the reaction I had hoped for. He certainly wasn't looking intimidated. We? Who's we? He asked. It doesn't matter, Diego. Stop calling me Diego, he suddenly yelled, and I flinched, feeling startled. I don't know you. His eyes were wide and his nostrils flared. I had definitely hit a nerve. You don't talk to me like you know me. It was reminiscent of what had happened with Dustin at Denny's. The place grew quiet for a minute while patrons and employees looked over. I didn't expect a manager to approach us to ask us to keep it down in this case, however. The person who had just yelled at me was wearing a Salt Lake City police uniform. What was the manager going to do? Threaten to call the cops? I already told you who I was, I said calmly, ignoring his anger. I had to keep calm because getting angry could give him an excuse to arrest me. I just want Samantha. I don't care about what else you people are up to. Tell me where she is and agree to hand her over, and I'm gone. That's a promise. It wasn't a promise I was sure I would keep. The idea that there were other women like Samantha being held against their will to be sex slaves wasn't something I thought I could just ignore. But I was willing to say anything to get Samantha back. After that, we'd see what happened. Menendez shook his head with an expression of amazement. You're either crazy or this is the worst practical joke anyone has ever played on me. I don't have any idea what you're talking about. Like I told you before, I've been talking to no one. This is all bullcrap, and you can tell those stuffed shirt jerks downtown that I'm done with it. Keep harassing me, and I'll be the one going to the feds, the union, whatever I got to do to get this to stop. I got the message, and I've done what I was told. Now it was my turn to be confused. The mention of the feds fit if he was threatening to turn state's evidence against a cartel enterprise. But the reference to the stuffed shirt jerks downtown, that sounded like politicians or maybe police brass. Could it really go up that high? Was Menendez telling me that the higher echelon of the Salt Lake City Police Department were on the cartel's payroll? If so, Samantha and now both Kent and I were in a lot more trouble than I ever imagined. So far, Menendez seemed to think I was either with the cartel or was maybe some kind of message boy for his superiors with the police department. I frantically racked my brain trying to remember if I had ever given him my name. He definitely remembered my face. That was bad enough, but I might still be able to slip away from this if he didn't know who I was. Menendez, I'm not here to check up on you. I'm here for Samantha. That's it. This doesn't have to become a big thing. Nothing has to come to light. Just Samantha Palmerson. That's all I care about. He scrunched up his brow as if thinking over what I said. So you're not from the city or the department? It was a strange question. This wasn't Mexico. Our government, though corrupt in some regard, didn't have the kind of crippling malfeasance the Mexican government suffered from. Going to the media was often the safest and only avenue for a whistleblower in that kind of environment. Here in the United States, there was still enough integrity in organizations, such as the FBI or Justice Department, to turn to if the local police force was off the rails. At least that's what I wanted to believe. I was beginning to wonder if Menendez and I were talking about the same thing. Why do you think I'm from the city? I asked him. He squinted his eyes and his demeanor changed from hostile to curious. You're for real? Palmerson, right? That blonde girl that went missing a few years ago? I nodded my head. Yeah, I'm for real. That's why I came to talk to you before. You arrested her. He cut me off with a wave of his hand. Yeah, I remember. I know who you're talking about. He began looking around the restaurant, and then he focused his attention on the street. Who are you again? A reporter. What? You said we. Who are you with? The Salt Lake Tribune? I debated whether to tell him. He didn't remember my name, and I had the temptation to just stand and walk away. But where would I go? To the van. He would just pull me over, or at least get my license plate number and find out who I was that way. I could walk, maybe catch the bus, but I was sure he would find a reason to detain me if I tried that. I couldn't blame him either. I had barged in on him and accused him of being a dirty cop while he was just minding his own business. I'm a private investigator hired by Dustin Palmerson, Samantha's father, I explained. I'm totally legit. What I said to you before is true. It's the only thing I care about. If it's money you want, her father could pay. We could arrange that, but you gotta be willing to deal. I thought I would try the truth. I was ready to beg if I thought that would work. He was back to being cautious. He studied me, slack-jawed, his hamburger and fries forgotten on the table as he stared back. My lunch break is over, he said and stood up while gathering his half-eaten meal. I wasn't sure what this man knew, but I thought he knew something, and I felt my chance of discovering it slipping away and ending up in the trash bin along with his food. I did what I was ready to do. I begged, please talk to me. My business partner followed some guys that were probably holding a girl against her will to some trailers out west. We think there's a chance it was Samantha Palmerson. Please help us. Her dad is an old man who just wants his daughter back. I meant what I said. He'll pay money for her. It's all he and I want. Just Samantha, and you'll never see me again. He had his back to me while emptying his tray into the garbage. But now he spun around. You say I'm cartel again, and I swear I'll gun you down right here in front of these people, he yelled. You hear me, gringo? Don't you ever accuse me of that again. He was inches from my face, and spittle from his mouth had flown out and into my eyes, causing me to blink. His own eyes burned like two fiery pieces of black obsidian. Once again, the restaurant became quiet, every person staring at the outburst. Come here, he said as he grabbed the right sleeve of my coat and dragged me out to the parking lot. I wasn't sure what he was going to do, arrest me or maybe try to beat me to death. If my former suspicion was right and he was dirty, arresting me probably meant I would end up dead somewhere. It was a pathetic thing to do, but I impulsively yelled, My name is Seth Greenwood, and I live in Provo, as we exited the building. Menendez looked at me and shook his head contemptuously. Okay, so now I know what your problem is. You're an idiot. He dragged me over next to his car and then spun me forward to face him. I can't talk to you right now, he said. Not here. I can't be seen talking to you. You got a business card? No, I said. He scrunched his face up in disbelief. Seriously? Yeah, I said. I don't have one. He let go of my sleeve and seemed to relax as he studied me over. Well, tell me a way I can get a hold of you, he said. I took out my memo pad and pen and wrote down my name and cell number. He watched me with an amused expression and raised eyebrows as I tore out the sheet and handed it to him. He took it and put it in his shirt pocket. I'll check you out. See if you're legit. I'll check this Dustin Palmerson guy out too. Expect a call in a few hours. He then got in his vehicle, started the engine, and drove out onto State Street. I watched him go, only partially aware of the people inside the Carl's Jr. staring out the window. I walked numbly to the van. I was having a hard time trying to put together exactly what had happened. I climbed into the van and unlocked my iPhone. I called Kent, and he answered on the first ring. What's up? He asked. His voice was considerably more genial than it had been before. I pushed him. And? Not sure, I said. That's not what I wanted to hear. We've had too much of that lately. Yeah, I know, but it's the truth, I said. I honestly don't know. He could be dirty, but my gut is telling me no. I relayed the whole conversation to Kent. He let out a frustrated sigh when I finished. I don't know if I can handle another hour out here. Not to mention a couple. I'm gonna need you to relieve me. Of course. Send me a link and I'll head out. Okay, give me a sec. My phone dinged to inform me I had a text, and I opened my messages to access the link. I was amazed to see that Kent was more than 40 miles away. Skull Valley? Seriously? Yeah, it's like I said. It's out in the middle of the desert. Okay, I'll head out right now, I said. We can just trade vehicles. How am I supposed to approach it? How are you staying hidden? That's the part you aren't going to like. You're going to need to switch the van for my Suburban because you'll need four-wheel drive. Call me again when you get about 10 miles out, and I'll explain it to you. He was right. I already didn't like it. It probably involved being cold and miserable. Okay, I said, feeling less than enthused, and I ended the connection. I guessed I would need some food, so I drove to a nearby Walmart and bought the standard surveillance fare. Chips, ding-dongs, garlic-flavored Triscuits, my personal favorite, and some apples so I could tell myself I was eating healthy. I drove to where Kent had parked his Suburban and transferred everything into the big SUV. I started it, and as I waited for it to warm up, I routed Kent's location on my phone. Google Maps showed the fastest way there was to take I-80 west to State Route 196. I would then go south on 196 to the Skull Valley off-road camping area. From there, it looked like a straight 2 miles into the desert. As I studied the map, I could see why Kent thought the Suburban was a better choice. It was December, and though there hadn't been any major snow yet, it was still bound to be muddy and difficult for a minivan. Once the heater began to blow warm air, I put the truck into drive, made my way to State Street, and then headed north toward the I-80 on-ramp. Just as I was about to turn left onto the interstate, I got a call. It wasn't a number I recognized, but since it could be Menendez, I answered it. So you're for real? It was Menendez. That was a quick few hours, I said, while looking at my watch and noting that only 40 minutes had passed since I talked to him. You guys cleared fast, you and your business partner. Yeah, we're for real. And you guys really found some trailers out in the desert? He asked. I haven't seen them, but my partner, Kent Somerville, is watching them. I'm headed out there right now, in fact. The line was quiet for a few seconds. Can you meet with me again? Menendez said. Right now? Yeah, now. I told you, I'm headed out to where my partner is, I said. He's been out there for most of the day. Send me the coordinates then, and I'll meet you out there. No way. What do you mean, no way? He asked. I don't know if I can trust you yet, I responded. I'm still not sure if you're part of it. If I was, why would I need the coordinates? Wouldn't I already know about it? It was an excellent point, but I wasn't ready to let my guard down. Maybe you think we're bluffing, and you want to see what we got, I countered. It felt as foolish to say it as it sounded. Menendez let out an exasperated pish. You guys have no idea what you're messing with. I know these people. I know what they're capable of. So you are part of it then? No, stupid, he said. I grew up around it in Mexico. I saw them destroy my community and my country. Kidnapping young women and forcing them into prostitution is a common and old game for them. I left Mexico to escape all of it. This is my country now, and I don't want it happening here. I'm trying to help you. It sounded good, but I wasn't going to tell him where Kent was. Where are you right now? I asked him. In the parking lot of my department. Could you get a vehicle that's not a squad car? He didn't answer for a few seconds and then said, Yeah, that would make sense. I can get an unmarked. It will still scream cop car if someone looks at it close enough, but from a distance or a casual glance, it'll blend in well enough. Good enough, I said. Go west on Interstate 80 and get off at the State Route 196 Rowley Road exit. I'll be waiting there for you. What do you have planned? He asked a little apprehensively. It's that or nothing. I'm leaving right now. I didn't give him a chance to respond and ended the connection. I picked up my speed as I continued west, determined to be way ahead of him. I called Kent. He began speaking as soon as he answered. You better be getting close. I'm going to need an ambulance or even a coroner if it's much longer. I'm freezing to death. I'm on 80 and heading out there right now, I said. A little change in plans, though. You're going to have to trust me. No offense, Seth, but your ideas haven't been all that wonderful as of late. I know, and this one could be the worst yet. I explained what I wanted to do, with Kent only calling me a sucker a total of 2 times, which indicated it wasn't a complete loser of an idea. If I even suspect he's setting us up, I'm shooting him, and then you for letting it happen, Kent said. I wouldn't expect you to do anything less, I said and ended the call. If Kent didn't shoot me, I might do it myself if Menendez was, in fact, setting us up. I didn't think Menendez was lying to me, though. His rage at me associating him with the cartel at Carl's Jr. wasn't from fear of being found in collusion. It had the spirit of disgust. Still, maybe he was just that good. Just in case, I would have the restraining strap on my holster loosened when he showed up. I saw that the area at the bottom of the off-ramp had a huge dirt parking lot for commercial trucks. 2 trucks were parked there, which provided an open view to the interstate, making an ambush by Menendez unlikely and therefore a good place to meet. I parked the big Chevy facing southeast so I could see every vehicle that got off the freeway long before they made it to the bottom of the ramp. For the next 10 minutes, the only traffic was from commercial trucks on their way to the salt refinery a few miles further west, or workers from the same refinery entering the freeway as they got off work. Around 3:15, a brown Chevy Impala exited behind a yellow day cab, pulling a flatbed trailer. I couldn't tell if the driver was Menendez, but the Impala screamed cop car, and I assumed it was him. I quickly fished out a pair of binoculars from my gear bag and trained them on the Impala. It was Menendez, all right, and as far as I could tell, he was alone. When the Impala reached the bottom of the ramp, I flashed my headlights on and off to get his attention. He drove straight to my position, and I rolled down the driver's side window. He followed suit. Park your car and get in, I said, and then I rolled my window back up and made the show of looking at my phone before he could offer up any objections. He looked at me for a few seconds, then turned the Impala around and back perpendicular to the Suburban. Menendez is here, I texted to Kent. He looks like he's alone. I'm heading out with him in a few minutes. I'll text you when we get close. Menendez got out of his car and walked over to the Suburban. I unlocked the doors and motioned for him to get in. He opened the passenger door and I placed my hand on the butt of my .38 as he got into the vehicle. I scanned him for weapons and only saw what was likely his service weapon, a Smith & Wesson from the looks of it, strapped to his side. He had changed into civilian clothes and was wearing blue jeans with a plaid button-down shirt and a heavy brown coat. He sat down beside me and gave me a once-over. If you're going to shoot me with that thing, then do it. Otherwise, lay off before you accidentally shoot yourself. He gestured toward my .38 as he spoke, his demeanor almost bored. I suppose you get that way about the threat of violence if you've served in a war zone as a soldier and as a beat cop for almost a decade. I took my hand off the revolver, feeling a little foolish. Sorry, I said. Just being cautious. He nodded his head slightly. It's understandable, he said calmly. I'd do the same if someone who I suspected might be a cartel member got into my car, but I think it's time to get past that. No more special agent mystery stuff, okay? Where are we going? Just a little bit more secret agent stuff? Then my partner will tell you everything. It's only a few miles from here. Menendez sat back in the passenger seat and motioned forward. You're in charge, he said. I started the truck and drove south onto State Route 196. We cleared an underpass and drove for a mile, then turned east onto a dirt road. Kent had told me to turn right at a rusted 50-gallon oil drum. I saw the drum and turned down another dirt road. I was glad Kent had me get his truck instead of trying to brave it in the minivan. There were maybe 3 inches of snow on the ground, something the van could have handled, but it had warmed up in the past week, and the tires of the Suburban began to spin in what must have been another couple of inches of mud under the snow. I goosed the gas when I felt the vehicle begin to fishtail, then typed one-handed to Kent. We're here. I hurriedly placed the phone down to concentrate on the slippery road. The road made a sharp bend to the right, and out of a cluster of juniper trees stepped Kent with his Glock drawn and pointed at the windshield. He gestured with his left hand for me to stop. I stepped on the brake, and the Suburban slid a couple of feet in the mud and snow before coming to stop. Kent shifted his Glock and pointed it at Menendez. Get out, he yelled. Menendez shot a quick glance at me, and I shrugged. I had pulled my own weapon and had trained the barrel on Menendez's midsection while keeping it rested against my belly to make it difficult for him to grab it. He stared at me with angry eyes as I reached over and said, steady, as I withdrew his Smith & Wesson from his holster and placed it in the left pocket of my parka. We're just being cautious, I said. Cautious? I'm a cop, man. You guys are morons pulling guns on me. I said, get out, Kent screamed louder this time. I didn't respond to Menendez as I stepped out of the Suburban, shutting it off and taking the ignition keys as I did so. I continued to point my weapon at Menendez as I walked around the front of the Suburban and over next to Kent. Menendez looked at us both from inside the vehicle, shook his head in disgust, and opened the door. This is so stupid, he said. I came out here to help you. Whatever you're doing, you better think it over. I'm a cop. Yeah, you've already said that. If you're in nasty with the cartel, my guess is your fellow cops aren't going to care very much. Now turn around, Kent said as he pushed against Menendez's left shoulder. You know all about this, so I'm not going to explain it to you. I'm checking you for weapons and wires. Wires? Menendez asked, confused.